Hi, welcome back to our show, Light on America, and thank you for joining us again. I'm Pat Micone, president of the Republican Club of Laguna Woods, and I'm here with my friend, colleague, and co-host, Betty Oliker. She's our vice president of programs. And the mission and purpose of our show, Light on America, is to shed light on and bring facts and truth to dispel misinformation, disinformation, and yes, even malinformation surrounding the key issues and events of the day. Facts that you may not be hearing in the mainstream media. Our guest today is Jeffery Scott Brown. He's a young man among hundreds of American patriots caught up in the post-rally chaos on January 6, 2021. Jeffery spoke at our March meeting last month, where over 175 members eagerly came to hear him speak and share his personal testimony about the horrors of that day. His personal account and presentation is compelling, and that's why we asked him back, so more of you can hear the truth firsthand. Now I'm going to hand you over to Betty, who is going to share his bio and then introduce him formally.
Thank you, Pat. Jeffery was arrested on August 26, 2021, and has served the last 3.5 years incarcerated in federal custody in 11 different facilities across the U.S., ending his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Lombok, California. Jeff spent his formative years between Southern California and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where he developed a passion for outdoor sports and activities. He achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, demonstrating his leadership and commitment to service. He earned his bachelor's degree in business administration and also holds an FAA commercial pilot's license and held a certified flight instructor certificate. Throughout his career, Jeff has played a key role in designing, training, and development programs for internet technology implementations, serving both domestic and international corporations. He also worked as a sales and design consultant for one of the nation's largest private residential construction firms. Committed to giving back, Jeff volunteered his time and resources to support Orange County food banks and animal shelters. His interest in politics was sparked in 2015 when Donald Trump rode down the Golden Escalator, an event that marked the beginning of an engaging and transformative journey. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate you inviting me to this venue. I think it's very important that we get the news out there and the information out there. As you mentioned, disinformation, the misinformation is what we love to hear the media say all the time, correct? So yes, I'm glad to be here, and what we're going to do today is just kind of give you a little bit of an insider view of what happened that day, what led up to January 6th, of course, and then what's happened since. So we'll get going. One of the things I like to ask people or question them is if they were going to be at January 6th too. A lot of people were going to be there. Some people weren't able to be because it was such shorthand notice, but there were a lot of people. Some estimates say about 1 million people were there. If you look at some of the news articles, they say tens of thousands. So it's always, again, the misinformation, disinformation.
Yes.
But the important thing about January 6th is to understanding it is that it wasn't just a day. It was a culmination of literally years that go all the way back to the time when then candidate Trump was running for the presidency in 2015 and 2016. And so we're going to take a look back at some of the stories that we experienced that time, because it's the stories that we encountered that created the whole narrative that led up to January 6th. And then as we look at these stories, these are going to be massive stories that we were subject to for some of them weeks, some of them months, some of them years. And at the end of it, I'm going to ask you a kind of a pertinent question to kind of wrap it up. So let's take a look at some of the stories that we experienced over this time.
Okay.
Again, we're going back from candidate Trump initially. So first off, we were told that he was a Russian puppet, right?
Yep.
And then that was the lie. He wasn't. He was acquitted of that. Then we were told that there was a quid pro quo for Ukraine. And again, they came out later and said, no, that's a lie too. Of course, the second impeachment, the impeachment that happened after he was out of office, incredible as that may sound. Then we were told that Trump called Nazis and white supremacists, very fine people. Okay, that lie, the Charlottesville lie.
Yep.
And the interesting thing about that particular lie, that has continued on for so long, and it was used as recently as the DNC convention in 2024. Candidate Biden said that the reason he got into the presidential race was because of the Charlottesville hoax or lie. And then Obama perpetrated that lie once again at the DNC convention in 24. So that again is all you got to do is listen to the tape. That's it. They cut it all. We were told that Jussie Smollett was attacked by MAGA in the middle of the night in a massive snowstorm in downtown Chicago, which we know is not MAGA land. We were told, he said, someone did that. Finally, the brothers came forward.
Yes.
Again, another lie, massive lie. Think about what they did to try to do the MAGA movement at that point, the lies that they told about that. We were told that President Trump cleared Lafayette Square violently in order for a photo op, okay? That again was another lie, and they perpetrated that on and on, again, to make Trump look like a tyrant. We were told that he didn't care about Russian bounties that were placed on the US troops. He didn't care. Again, that was a lie, carried on over and over. Continued lies, continued lies. We were told COVID had natural origin. Well, what do we know now? Absolute lie, it's not. We were told that social distancing was based on science. Now, this is a lie that was perpetrated on the entire world, okay? Found out later,
Yeah.
Fauci said, no, we just made it up. Out of his mouth, we just made it up. And think about what that did to the entire world. We were told that hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin wouldn't work and would kill you. Again, not true. It's been used for decades safely and effectively. We were told that if you get the vax, you're not going to get or spread COVID. Again, another lie. All of these lies continued by the mainstream media. We were told that the laptop from hell was fake Russian propaganda. What did they say? It had the earmarks of a Russian intel operation. Okay? They knew full well. In fact, the FBI had it for a year before that was even used. We were told that inflation was transitory. Yeah, that was a little bit after the election, but nonetheless, what did they do? They just continue to gaslight people, saying what you're seeing is not really what's happening. We were told that big tech wasn't colluding with government against conservatives. Everybody saw it, everybody knew it, and the stories started to come out too, and we know even more. Thank goodness for the Twitter files that Elon released that also gave a lot of detail on that.
Thank God for that.
We were told that Biden didn't have dementia. This is front and center in the headlines right now as the media is all of a sudden discovering after the fact that he had dementia. We didn't know, but yet every single American sitting home on their couch knew Biden had dementia, but everyone who had inside access to the White House didn't have a clue. He was running circles around everyone. This is the biggest lie, I think, that actually, I think it cracked the media. It didn't break the media, but it cracked the media now to where people really know that everything that they talk about essentially is some sort of propagandist lie.
I hope.
We were told that there was no interference in the 2020 election. Well, they wrote about it in Time magazine, Molly Ball did, about how there was this secret shadow government to fortify the election. In other words, fortify it in their favor to steal it. Okay, we were told that the border was closed. Nope, nothing to see here. Absolutely not, a lie. Again, these are lies that lasted some weeks, some months, and some years. Some are coming up on a decade even. We were told that BLM and Antifa riots were mostly peaceful, and how pertinent is this today as we watch what's happening in Los Angeles this weekend, and what do we see the newscasters? Oh, these are mostly peaceful riots.
Yes.
And we say, one of the newscasters here actually said, well, it's just some people who want to have fun watching cars burn. It's no big deal. And all the leadership is saying, don't send in the police. Again, it's this two-tier system that is both part of the justice and the mainstream reporting news. So my question to you is this. If what they told us, and those are just a few samplings of the lies that I can
They're
come up with.
excellent,
You can sit
They're
here for
excellent.
hours and come up with this stuff.
Yes.
But if all those were lies, what's the likelihood that what they told you about January 6th is, again, one of those massive lies? Okay?
Yes.
The answer is more than likely. So why is this possible? Why is the mainstream media allowed to again, effectively propagandize the American people Well, it was put together in 2012 under the Obama administration under one of the Defense Authorization Acts, and they modified what was called the Smith-Mund Act, and that was the ability for the media to use propaganda within our borders. Now, they've been using our government's been using propaganda for years, and they've been using it against us too, but nonetheless, they've been doing it externally. All governments essentially do propaganda to some extent. But it was mostly focused on other countries. Since that act was changed, if you notice, if you think back in time, that's kind of when things started to get, the media started to change. And of course, once Trump came down the golden escalator, that was the kickoff point to where they really went deep and hard. That's just a little bit about me. But so I got pardoned on January 20th. It was an amazing day. There's a picture of my pardon right there.
Yes.
And it was signed, and then I got released from a halfway house. I worked my way down to a halfway house. I was in a halfway house for 3 weeks when I got pardoned, but I spent the previous 3.5 years confined. There's an amazing video of President Trump signing the bill right there. And when this was signed, I actually didn't see him signing it, and I got a phone call. And they said, hey, it's been signed, it's done. I said, how do you know? And they said, well, I just saw it on TV. And I said, well, prove it. You got to send me the video, because it's like, I know how things are. I really want to see what happened. And there was President Trump signing that video, and then literally handing it to the gentleman next to him and saying, hey, take this down now and let's get this going. We want these people out tonight. And that, in fact, did happen. At 9:20 that night, I walked out of the halfway house to the YMCA, just playing, and it was great.
Oh, surreal.
Caveat playing in the car. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Okay, so a couple things. I know that there are a lot of people out there that hate me as a January 6th, and I know they hate a lot of people in January 6th, including the MAGA movement. Yes, there was chaos and confusion at the Capitol on January 6th, but that was preceded by cops attacking the crowd. And we're going to take a look at some video. You're going to see some video that hasn't been released. And a lot of the video has not been released, even though some of it's been declassified. So we're going to take a look at some video that you absolutely have not seen. Once they attacked us, there was resistance to those attacks, and I was involved in that resistance. I was up there in the front, and I was arrested and convicted and tried, and I spent 3 years and 11 months in federal confinement, whether it was in prison, in jail, in a halfway house, or at home confinement throughout that time. So I've been through the entire judicial system. The media says, "Oh, well, you people should, you people should pay for what happened." Well, I paid for what happened already dearly. I spent lots of time in prison for that. So when they make it sound like, "Oh, we got off with something light and easy," absolutely not. And I'll get into a little bit more details about what happened during that journey that go through there. So I've been put through the full weight of the federal government from top to bottom, and so don't tell me that I have something coming.
Your eyes are open.
Exactly, wide open. So basically, a lot of people don't really understand what January 6th was. So in a nutshell, and here it is up on there for in one sentence, the purpose of January 6th was about the 2020 election and how we had felt, many people had felt and seen evidence that showed fraud. So what we were going to do is we were going to be there that day on January 6th. President Trump invited us. He said, hey, we're going to have a rally, come to DC, and a lot of people went, obviously. And then we went down, we were to go down to the Capitol to provide encouragement for then Vice President Mike Pence to say, hey, look, today's the day that we do the Electoral Count Vote Act, but there's some issues, especially in some of the swing states, since the election and since they even certified some of their electoral votes, they've then uncovered stuff that is questionable to them. So they want to take another look. So rather than do it today, which we typically do, we're going to take a timeout, we're going to take a 10-day hiatus, and we're going to do a little bit more investigation before we run down this path and certify these electors just to make sure we're on the right. So we weren't there to overturn the election. Okay, we weren't there to stop democracy from proceeding. We were just there to say, hey, look, we support you. We're showing that this many people that was out there say, hey, look, something's up. We'd like you to take time and just call the time out. And then at the end of the 10 days, we'll convene back here and go through that process. And that process, of course, would be each state certifying their electors. And in order to do that certification of elector, there can be an objection. And there's an objection from someone from the House of Representatives and at least one senator. ejection can be sustained, and at that point, there's a breakout session where the House goes one way and the Senate goes the other way, and they investigate that particular state for 2 hours each. So that's basically 4 hours per state. And there was going to be at least 6 objections that we know of. So that would have been 24 hours worth of discussion on election fraud that would have been on a worldwide stage. And that's something that couldn't be tolerated, which is one of the emphasis of what evolved into what happened.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So, what did the left think January 6th was about? They knew it was about total submission of both Donald Trump and his candidacy and the MAGA movement. They wanted to snuff us out like a cigarette on the floor. That was what they tried to do that day, and they perpetrated it from that very moment and to this day. I mean, literally every single day there has been a story on January 6th, even since the election. Over and over, and it's coming up. And now I think we're going to even hear more of it, especially the compare and contrast. So we're going to go through a couple compare and contrasts of the BLM riots, but what's already occurred at this last weekend in Los Angeles is far greater, both damage-wise and breaking the law than ever occurred on January 6th.
And I hear they're calling it January J7.
J7, yes.
Naming it J7.
Let's have a J7 commission.
Yeah.
The left likes to talk about political violence. They like to say that the right is politically violent, and I completely disagree with that. In fact, if you think about what happened during the BLM riots, what did conservatives do? We stayed at home and watched it happen on our television set going, oh my gosh, is anything going to happen?
Yeah.
And the answer is no, nothing's going to happen to them. They're going to be lauded and encouraged. The real political violence is what they've done to this country, part of the stories that we talked about earlier on, and since then, during the last administration as well. That is the political violence to this country that is tearing it apart.
Yes.
And that is the real threat to democracy that they love to talk about, is what we're dealing with. And one of the things you have to remember about the left is they are projectionists. So what that means is that whatever they claim that we're doing, it's exactly what they're doing. Okay? It's that little game where they put the ball into the cup and move it around and go, oh yeah, you know what, it's not us, it's you. So just remember that whenever they're pointing the finger, it's exactly what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about what really started January 6th, and then there's going to be a time period of leading up to January 6th, and that is from the election until January 6th, and then post-January 6th. And where do I think January 6th is going, especially now that we have new administration and we have new folks involved in the different agencies, whether it be the Department of Justice or whether it be the FBI, where we think those things are coming based on staffing and stuff like that. In the beginning, the biggest I think direction that they tried to derail Trump was, of course, the Russia collusion and. Yes. In doing that, we're learning more about that now too, about the FISA applications, how the FBI literally lied to the FISA judges, which is the Federal Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and lied to those judges in order to get subpoenas, in order to be able to spy on the Trump campaign. And we all know that it was started by Hillary Clinton, paid by for a Steele dossier to come back in, and then they started using the media to backfill. And Nancy Pelosi talked about it one time. It's called the wrap-up smear, where you leak stuff to the media and then the media comes out with it and then they show reporting. So they have this verification or validation of that. And all of it was lies. That was the first thing. Then we had that impeachment. And then the other big thing that led, obviously, to January 6th was COVID and the lockdowns that occurred. Mm-hmm. And in California, we really experienced it here. I didn't travel to any other states during that time, but I had friends that were in other states, like in Florida and stuff like that. It's like they didn't even know anything was going on. So we had it very different in different states, especially the blue states. But it was all the mandates and lockdowns and overreach of the government, especially the big lie of let's shut everything down for 15 days to slow the curve, right? Remember that? Slow the curve?
Right.
And then it turned into 30 days, and they just continued to roll with that.
Yep.
Then we had the Summer of Love riots. And again, we were sitting at home watching, like, how can they let this happen? We were at home saying, this is wrong. You know, we're not going to do this. And again, we stayed home, we stayed home, we stayed home, we stayed home, we stayed at home until January 6th, when we're there to peacefully let our voices heard, just as President Trump talked about. And then the Biden dementia candidacy. We all saw the campaign and we all saw the gaslighting from the media,
Yes.
how Biden had literally no one at their rallies. Well, they blamed COVID on that, where they had the big circles, if you remember, and no one could be
Yes.
in more person in one circle.
Yep.
We saw all the rallies where no one showed up. We saw him stumbling all over every single one of his words. He couldn't keep it together. And that was just another gaslight that thankfully a lot of American people saw through that.
Yes.
Then the other big thing that led to it was the unconstitutional changes to election law. So
Yes.
according to the Constitution, the legislatures have the methods and means to elections. That doesn't mean that the courts have it. That doesn't mean that attorney generals have it. That doesn't mean that the register of voters have the ability to change election laws. They do not. It's the legislature. So we saw laws being changed all over the place where, you know what, we're going to start mail-out ballot early. We're going to start mail-out ballots where they didn't have it before. We're not going to worry about drop boxes. We're not going to worry about if ballots come in, and even though they're supposed to have signatures and they're supposed to be post-dated, who cares? We don't care if they come in one day late. In fact, Pennsylvania changed it on the fly, where they were going to allow 5 days, and then I think they went to 7 or 10 days after the election. All that stuff was just.
And that was only a few weeks before the election,
yeah,
wasn't it? It was
yeah.
very late.
Well, we had Mark Elias and all that
Yes.
changing all the laws, and basically what he'd do is he'd go into a particular state and go to that Secretary of State, hey, I'm going to threaten you unless you do this, and rather than want to face a lawsuit for themselves, they said they just acquiesced and did whatever he wanted. So there was a lot of lawfare that went into that as well. And then, of course, the laptop from hell. And this was the point. I was not what they like to call an election denier leading into the 2020 election. I really wasn't. But once the suppression from the Hunter Biden laptop started to occur, I started thinking to myself, wow, this is really coordinated and this is really significant. And especially when they went and got the 51 intel agents that said,
I know
hey,
that.
you know what, this is Russian disinformation. In order for Biden to be able to pull that out and use that at was there only one presidential debate? The last presidential debate, nonetheless, for that campaign cycle, and pull it out and say, no, that everything he said was a lie, knowing full well that it was absolutely real, and the FBI had it from the previous December, and they know it was real. And fortunately, a lot of those people now finally have their security clearances revoked, which is obviously due. And then the real thing, so when I say I wasn't an election liar, I was like, hey, you know what, I'm going to vote in California, and yeah, we kind of know that maybe our votes don't necessarily count in presidential elections, so we kind of get wiped out based on the overall electoral count here. But I was going to be part of the MAGA movement, and on election night, when the vote counting stopped, that's when I said, no way, this isn't right. There's absolutely something going on with this election. You can't tell me that people are too tired and they got to go home, or that there's a water leak in some place and they got to shut down the vote count because of that. And then later on, we kind of saw what happened, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about comparison, contrast. And this is the 2020 riots. We're not talking about the riots that are going on right now, or the peaceful protests, sorry.
Yeah.
The Summer of Love riots had 36 times more injured officers, 19 times more arrests, and 720 times more costly than January 6th. But after the Summer of Love, did you hear, even during it, did you hear any pushback on any of it? Not one single Democrat, including the presidential candidate, didn't come out against it at all.
Right.
All the J6ers were heavily pursued by the Department of Justice, whereas the Department of Justice didn't come after anyone hardly in the BLM riots.
That's true.
And they mostly said, well, that's because it wasn't at federal facilities. Well, that's not necessarily true, because it happened at federal facilities in Oregon. And what happened to those people who used fireworks and lasers and frozen bottles and all that kind of stuff? Nothing. Actually, one of them got charged, and it was for a few months. That's because he was caught on videotape actually literally beating a cop with a bat, and he posted it up online. But Merrick Garland told us specifically, this is the largest manhunt in American history, is at January 6th. So we know that for a fact. When we were detained, we were not allowed bond. So I'll go into a story a little bit about mine, but in general, when all of us got arrested, fortunately, a lot of the women did not get detained, but if you were a male and you got arrested, you were very unlikely to get bond. And that also violated some of our civil rights of some of the bond acts and stuff in the past, because there's supposed to be absolutely no way that you could be out on bond, and that's not true. And the biggest difference overall, I guess you would say, between January 6th and BLM is that almost all the charges for the BLM riots were dropped. Very few. I know that there was one conviction of a guy who had lit a pawn shop, and this was in Minneapolis, lit a pawn shop on fire, and it killed someone who was sleeping in it, and that was murder. And that guy, I think, got 7 years. I ended up with 4.5 years and didn't kill anyone. So the disparity in the double two-tier justice is on full display. And when it comes to domestic terrorism, I was labeled a domestic terrorist. So once I was arrested and confined, my record in my jacket as I follow me labeled me as a domestic terrorist. So I had additional eyes on me and additional scrutiny along that way, and different treatment as a result of that. And so it's interesting when the left talks about domestic violence. So we saw a bunch of it this weekend. We're going to take a look here, and this is a video. Actually, you know what? I'm not sure if we're able to play videos, but basically, this is a video here that talks about the backlash that we saw against Tesla vehicles. Okay. And if you could hear the audio on this, you could hear the crowd cheering as they see this place go up in flames. And they're calling, oh, well, this is just petty domestic terrorism. And that's exactly how they're gaslighting us with the stuff that's going on up in LA. There were 5 Waymo vehicles. I don't know how much each one of those costs, but let's say they're pretty expensive. Let's say they're a couple $100,000 each. Well, that is $1 million worth of damage. And those 5 vehicles, the entire damage at the Capitol was $1.2 million. Wow. For everything. Wow. And that just happened with 5 vehicles. And then we saw all the other damage that was happening in LA. And I had to pay a part of that. I literally had to pay all the January 6th defendants had to pay a part of that bill, and it really got paid. But none of the stuff during the BLM riots did they have to pay for.
Were they labeled domestic terrorists?
They were not. Oh, they were labeled peaceful protesters. This is an interesting photograph here, and this is from Donald Trump's first inauguration night. This is an aerial photo of DC, and it's not widely circulating anymore, but you can see all the smoke. I never saw that. Yeah, you can see all the smoke and fires. Now, there were protests that day, and there was stores that were shuttered and broken into and burned down, and cars and everything like that. Those protesters did get arrested. They were released later that night or the next morning, and then the ACLU came in and got them all paid because their civil rights had been violated when they got arrested.
Wow.
So here's a quick head-to-head as we go back and forth from BLM to January 6th. Okay. BLM lasted 7 months, 20 murders, hundreds of small businesses, 150 federal buildings, $2 billion worth of damage. That's 2B with $1 billion worth of damage. Okay? Over 2,000 officers were injured. Protesters were bailed out. They were encouraged by the media. In fact, Kamala Harris even tweeted to a fund in Minnesota to help bail out the protesters. And this was just a few months before the election. 2,300 looting incidents, over 600 arson, 97 cop cars. They all used Molotov cocktails, bricks, frozen water bottles, canned food, fireworks, and lasers. Now, some of the things we saw here, did you see where bricks were delivered? Pallets of bricks.
No, I didn't see that.
Cinder block was delivered in certain places. And then those cinder blocks somehow magically got used on the cop cars. If you saw them throwing them down on the police cars as they were down on the freeway. So they do all this stuff and organize it. That's one thing they do is they're good at organizing it. And that's exactly what you see here. This is not grassroots. This is 100% organized by the left. And a lot of the stories are coming out now about where that funding's coming from. And some of it's our tax money that they're using. But if we go to January 6th, it lasted a few hours. There were no murders. There were protesters killed, 2 killed, and 2 died of natural cardiac events. No small businesses were destroyed. There were 56 officers that were injured as opposed to the 2,000. Now, I'm not saying any number of injured officers is better than the other, because it's not.
Right.
But they also lied about that originally. Up until about a month ago, they had been telling it was been 140 officers. Well, that came out since the new administration has been in, that it was actually only 50 officers that even had to go in.
Yeah.
We were kept in solitary confinement, where they were released, and we were condemned by the media completely. Okay. So now let's jump ahead. So we talked about the election night and the vote counting stop. So what happened between election day and January 6th? Yeah. And we talked about the election night stop vote counting. Do you remember when Trump came out that night? It was later on in the evening, obviously because it was East Coast time. And he said, hey, it's looking good. We're way ahead. And he was millions of votes ahead. Mm-hmm. And he said, let's just hope they don't come up with a bunch of votes in the middle of the night. And that is exactly what happened. Yep. And so we all saw that, because they had the digital graphs of the votes, and you could see how Biden's vote went straight up in an unconventional way, not possible whatsoever. And then, so I'm starting to say, okay, wow, there's the Hunter Biden laptop, there's this vote counting stop, there's this all of a sudden miracle votes in the middle of the night, erasing all of Trump's leads that he had going in. Something's up. So then Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell started to tour around. I don't know if you guys remember that. Yep. And what they did is they went to legislatures, especially in the swing states, and they sat down with the legislatures, and of course only the Republican legislators show up, and the mainstream media was nowhere to be found. But what they did is they reported on things that were coming out. So they had thousands of affidavits of poll workers who had seen things going wrong in the voting booths. We saw the video of cardboard going up over the windows. We saw the video of totes being pulled out from underneath tables and started to count when no one was there. We saw all these things happening, and the media was just missing it purposefully. And when they did cover it, they said, oh no, that's not really the case, And then the corporate media continued to gaslight the public and saying that, everything was legitimate. Nothing to see here. Trump lost, and it's time to go home and move on. But the election laws again continued to change, and the vote count continued to change. And some states were done, 2 days after the election. I can't remember what state it was. Went on into late November. Right. You know what I mean? How does it take that long to count the votes? It never used to do that prior to 2016. It never took that long, and all of a sudden it does. And then we remember the $420 million of Zuckerbucks, and how they focused specifically on Democrat counties, and those also included the drop boxes that were around. They even had mobile vans going around collecting stuff. And then we saw videos of people stuffing ballots into these boxes that were supposed to be videotaped, and none of them were. And then we saw people come to pick them up that looked like they were who knows who, grabbing them, stuffing them in backpacks, and just walking off, not even counting, not even recording anything down. All this stuff was going on. And again, they're saying, hey, nothing to see here, everything's perfect. Then the silencing of Hunter Biden's laptop continued. Yeah. Then the lawsuits started to happen. So we had lawsuits from individual voters, we had lawsuits from candidates, we had lawsuits from counties, we had lawsuits from states, all about the election moving forward. And what does the mainstream media and the left say? They all were defeated, right? But none of them were defeated, because none of them saw the inside of a courtroom. They all got dismissed based on standing. So when they say Trump lost all those, not true at all. And that's one of the big myths that you hear. And most liberals know, oh yeah, he lost all those cases. No, and I say, well, if you say, they usually know the number, they say it's like 61 or 62. I say, can you just show me one of them? Show me one that says, here's what happened, here's the trial, here's the evidence that was presented, and this is what happened. And they can't, because none of that happened. Okay. Then we saw cybersecurity and Chris Krebs that come out and say that it was the most secure election in history. After everything that we've seen, and the government coming out and saying that, one thing for sure, that's nothing but a complete and total lie. And he committed perjury in front of Congress. He committed perjury on multiple levels, that the election was perfectly legit, and that machines could not connect to the internet. And we know again that is a complete falsehood. There's something else that came out after Biden's inauguration, and that deals with Bill Barr. And if you recall what Bill Barr said between Election Day and between Inauguration Day, that he's done his investigation and he's found no evidence of fraud in the 2020 election. Well, a FOIA was run on his emails for that time period, and it discovered that there was not one single email that had anything to do with election fraud. So he too lied to the American public, and he lied in front of Congress. And again, that's one of the things that left likes to say, your own Attorney General said that. Well, now we know that he was lying too.
That was shocking.
Yes, it was.
Okay, so let's jump to January 6th, the day. That day it was an early day for me. It was overcast. It was still dark. Obviously, it's the dead of winter, so it's dark in the morning.
Yeah.
I got up early. I flew in the night before. I saw a couple of rallies the evening before, and my ticket wasn't booked to fly out until January 8th. Because I knew that the process of having all these breakout sessions talking about each state and the objections was going to take a little bit of time, and I didn't want to leave in the middle of it. I wanted to say,
Right,
maybe it'll
see it
take a
through.
couple
Yeah,
days.
you were expecting that.
Yeah, I'll hang out and we'll see, till the end. And so I went out to try and get into the ellipse, which everyone's heard about, but it was already backed up, and the line to try and get in was backed all the way around the Washington Monument.
Wow, so
and it was
many
just
people.
a lot of people out there.
Wow.
Ultimately, I ended up standing on the grass because I couldn't get into the ellipse; it was already filled. But there's a little sloped grass that goes up to that, so we can kind of see in, and they had some big screen TVs. So we had a day of a great rally, and President Trump obviously concluded that rally, and he did say, move peacefully and patriotically. Let's go down to the Capitol. He also said, hey, I'm going to be down there, so I'll see you guys down there sooner or later on. So around right about 1:20 when it ended, the majority of people started to move down towards the Capitol. Now, there had already been people on the Capitol. In fact, we find out later on that some of the fencing had already been moved by the police. So as we get down there, I can hear these kind of explosions going off. I'm thinking, well, like fireworks. Like you hear the fireworks, we're going to celebrate here pretty soon. But when that fireworks goes off, you go, okay, that's what it is. Well, why would they be doing fireworks? It seemed kind of odd. But as you get closer, you can see these flashes of smoke in the crowd and stuff like that. It was very odd. And as we get closer to the Capitol and people are moving onto the Capitol grounds, we were told, one, by the president to be down there, that we could be down there. The Capitol grounds are normally not restricted, but in this particular day, they were restricted. And how they were restricted is that they had fencing. It's almost like that plastic snow fencing. It's
Like the orange fence?
yeah, the orange fencing. They had that around the outside of the Capitol, and every, say 100 yards or so, they had a little normal piece of paper that said restricted grounds. Well, by the time the majority of the people who have been listening to Trump got there, that plastic fence was gone. So we had no idea that the grounds were restricted. So we're moving towards the Capitol grounds. The president said we could be there.
Yep.
The grounds are not normally restricted. And once all the people get there, there are people with megaphones and like the traffic control jackets, the big neon jackets and the hats on and saying, come on up, everyone. Come on up. Move on up to the Capitol. Everyone, we're going in. Everyone, come on up. Well, we didn't know if everyone was going to get to go in. We didn't know what. We knew that Trump was going to come down there and speak. So we thought, well, they're moving this up so we can see where everything's going to happen. And perhaps maybe some of the legislatures inside that are making their objections are going to come out periodically and give reports. It's like we didn't really know, but we knew that we were told to be there, and we were encouraged to move up onto the Capitol grounds. And as we move up there, there's a little police line, and they have the bicycle racks. And at some point, the attack on the crowd began to escalate. And within 1 hour, there were 40 projectiles. And these are projectiles that one either explode in tear gas or they have these rubber bullet fragments that go off. And we're gonna take a look at a video in just a moment that's gonna go into a little bit more detail about that. And you're gonna see what happened. Once that occurred, after about an hour, and everyone's seeing people get injured for no reason. As a conservative, I'm a support the blue line, and so we're saying, hey, it's like during the summer of love, when they were trashing you and trying to defund you and do all that kind of stuff, we were saying no, we support the police. Couldn't figure out why it was that they were attacking us the way that they did. So that resulted in a little skirmish. I kind of liken it to like a rugby scrum. Really, it was some back and forth, and ultimately what happened is because of the excessive use of their tear gas and the direction of the wind, that tear gas actually moved back up onto the police line, and they went back up into the Capitol building, and they retreat. And so at that point, that's when people are moving, just moving up closer. I was up there in the very front lines. There's people who say, "Oh, you sprayed a cop in the face," and that's not possible. There's no video that shows that. There's no eyewitness. There's no victims, and all the cops had on at that point full rest sprays, like those Darth Vader things where they read. So there was no one. Yeah, they were spraying, and there was pepper spray flying back and forth all over the place that day, especially near the front lines. So everyone basically got sprayed that day.
Yeah.
And then it was declared an insurrection by the media, and quite honestly, I hadn't really heard of the word insurrection before. But then it came out on January 6th, and it's been spouted ever since.
We hear it all the time.
So as we watch this video, it's important to look into the video. Notice what's going on in the background. Notice what the cops are saying. Notice how aggressive they're being, and notice how people are restrained as much as they possibly can be until at such point it moves on.
Okay.
As I inched closer to the front lines, the tone started changing. I was told by a group of veterans that Capitol Police had already shot and killed an unarmed woman and given an older gentleman a heart attack by shooting flashbang grenades into the peaceful part of the crowd. While Ashley Babbitt's murder has been heavily publicized as there was no way to hide it,
so you can see,
few, if any, about the three other
So this right here is a
that
little
day.
bit of
Part of the footage that the feds didn't want released showed how
but
overzealous
different parts are broken down. So now you can
officers
see
were assaulting
how
and
peaceful
instigating the
everyone's
riot.
there with their flags, and we were singing the national anthem, and they're gearing up to come after
first
us.
to bring in explosive ammunition rounds that they will soon distribute to officers on the West Plaza. Officer Tarantino is crouched on the ground, readying CS gas rounds.
And you can see here they're
We have 8 blast munitions that we can deploy. Let's go. We gotta get them. Meet them.
how aggressive they are, wanting to shoot us.
Yes.
And you can see there 120. That was roughly the time that
that
Trump
you were
finished.
coming up from the
Yeah,
ellipse.
Unseen Commander Officer.
These are the
Robert
scatter
Block gives the
grenades
first
where they
audible
explode in
authorization to deploy
rubber bullets. And
explosives
watch the way
into
he
the
just
crowd.
grabbed this and just throws it in the crowd. Who cares if it hits someone in the head? Watch this. Chuck it right into the crowd like that.
Wow.
Doesn't care if it hits anyone in the head. I mean, that is a hard object. That guy in particular was instrumental in all of what happened.
He's
Shooting fish in a barrel.
What is he shooting? Tear gas?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big.
There you go. There's one of the rubber bolts that went through his cheek. Yeah. I mean, it effectively is a grenade with rubber instead of steel.
You didn't see any of this footage in the mainstream media.
No. This and when it comes to the video footage that's been released, there have been certain amounts of that have been released, and there was a lot of video that each of us as defendants were not allowed to use. Like, I wasn't allowed to actually use this video in my defense because they couldn't identify me in any of this video here, so he couldn't use it.
I see.
And it wasn't exactly within like almost a 5-foot perimeter of where I was.
Really?
Yeah.
At 1:32 p.m., an officer laments that chucking grenades into the crowd is just going to make things worse.
It's just gonna make it worse. Hey, stop.
Have they ever found Ray Epps?
Moments later, the same officer
Yes.
seems
So
to have
basically
changed
what
his
happened
mind
with
and is
Ray Epps
actively
is
searching
that
for
he
munitions
was
to
on the
discharge
FBI
into
list, then he
crowd.
got pulled off the list, then he stayed effectively not a target for almost a year and a half. Finally, they gave him some misdemeanor charges to kind of quell his story, and he got probation, and that was it. But he, again, was inciting a lot of stuff
I
that
need
day.
triple
Right.
chasers.
And how many FBI assets?
Well,
After not receiving
23 that
approval to
we
use the
know
triple
of. That's
chaser,
the number
Officer Fowl
that Ray
appears to
has
be reprimanded
admitted
by
to.
another officer for his use
We're
of
going to be
smoke
finding out
moments
some more
earlier.
information, according to Cash Patel,
Yes.
soon. That's
Hopefully.
going to give more detail to that.
Triple chaser. I know, but this splits it. I mean, we got better.
But they were just the line. We were just basically standing back.
Another
You see
captain tells
him
Officer Fowl to
spray
hold
people
when
that are
discharging
just
CS
standing
gas into the
around.
crowd.
This guy's telling him, "Hey man, chill out. Everything you're doing is just going to aggravate him." He's like, keeps doing it.
You respected the line for quite a while.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. See, when this guy throws this into a crowd, what happens? It's like if you throw it into a fishbowl, people are going to move in all directions, right? So as a result of that, the bicycle racks did get pushed against because of that, because people trying to flee the problem, and then they just attack more.
Now this is body cam.
This
we're
is
seeing,
correct,
right?
yeah,
We're actually
exactly.
seeing their body cam.
Right. So there's different stories, but there's somewhere between 14 and 14,000 hours worth of video. A lot, because every one of these cops had body cam, and it records, before the battery died, it records about 2 hours worth of video, and then all the cameras around the Capitol themselves.
Saw that into the crowd.
Yeah. So you can see all the people there just hanging out. No, notice that no one is on the building. A lot of time the media said, oh, well, they were climbing the structure and we had to get them off. No, that wasn't happening. They're already attacking. And then now what you can notice too is some of that smoke, because of the direction of the wind, is blowing back on them. And most of these guys don't have masks on down here.
Oh, yeah, he's
Once they get up to
covered
the
his
upper tiers,
Yes.
then they're going to have their
Yes.
full masks on. There he is again. Fire away.
Sitting ducks.
I'm amazed
Undernose.
they didn't rush them. I mean, really, that took some restraint.
Yeah, I mean we're back to blue all the way. But when we were told to be on the grounds, we were motioned to be up near the Capitol. We were waiting to see President Trump, and then all of a sudden this occurs. It's like it was very disorienting as well. It's like what's going on here? Why are you doing this?
Of course. That'd be terrifying.
Hey, Rich.
Now, could you imagine if you saw this in LA this week? What the media would be reporting on it? You'd see every single inch of this video. All of it. All for it.
They have body cam on in LA, don't they?
They're supposed to.
Stop doing the goddamn pepper spray.
120 to 225.
Yep.
The officer shoved him in off the ledge.
Yeah, he broke his leg.
We're taking out one and
Severe.
we're getting Wayne here. Multiplying
Yeah,
away.
if he landed on his back.
Lethally.
Right. That's what's called a super soaker. You see that big tank? It's full of pepper spray, and that's what's not technical. It's the street name for it.
They're gonna beat the fuck out of that guy.
Here they're just administering justice.
The cops are beating the fuck out of that guy.
I lost my flagpole.
These guys are laughing about how they got to beat people with the flagpoles inside the Capitol Rotunda.
If they'd never thrown the concussion grenades, if they'd never used the pepper spray, this wouldn't have happened. It was a peaceful protest. I was standing within 15 feet of the line of officers. They started firing at us before anybody did anything to them. We were not rushing them. There was no advance on them. They just started throwing concussion grenades and pepper spray.
The Inspector General called authorities out, not only for the complete lack of preparation, but also to point out that a civil disturbance unit was ordered not to use concussion grenades on the crowd that day.
Keep in mind that this is just a snippet of what occurred that day.
Yeah.
Just a snippet.
Sure.
Right.
And there's more and more that will slowly be released. I mean, it just needs to be, the key needs to be turned off to the vault and let everyone come in there so the world can go in there and dig through all this kind of stuff. So hopefully that happens, I'm sure. So now what I want to do is I want to touch on some of the biggest lies of January 6th itself. And the first one is that Trump denied the National Guard. And that's even coming up today as we speak. It came up this weekend. You know, Trump now, he wants to invite the National Guard just like he did before. And they're saying, no, it's a reach.
don't need them.
Well, he offered it before and they didn't want to do it. Both, and it's in writing, both Nancy Pelosi and Mary Bowser turned down the National Guard.
Yes.
So again, a lie that they have been perpetrating this whole time. Another one is that we knowingly entered restricted grounds, and I talked about that earlier. We didn't know it was restricted grounds. All the indications of restricted grounds were gone, plus the president told us to be there. So with all of that together, how could we possibly think that it was to be restricted grounds? Another one is that we showed up armed and violent. As you could see there, the video, we were just on the Capitol grounds with our flags, singing the national anthem. There was one flag that was massive. It was, I don't even know how big it was. It was being passed around on top of people's heads, and people were praying, and it was there to basically uplift the Congress to hopefully do the right thing, starting with Pence, and we know ultimately what happened.
Yes.
Another one is that we colluded and planned with each other. There was no collusion and plan. I ended up with 2 co-defendants, and that's just because they were in proximity to me. I didn't even know my co-defendants until I was actually locked up in jail with them. And that didn't happen. There was one gentleman who had a sealed Lego set of the US Capitals, not even opened. He's a school teacher, and they said, you're using that as your part of the plan for the Capitol, and that was actually introduced as evidence against him, which is unbelievable. Another one is that there was no FBI present. Well, finally, Ray let us know a little while ago. Hopefully, we're going to find out more that absolutely there. And police let people in. There's video. I don't have any of it, but there's lots of video of police opening the doors, opening the fences, letting people in, encouraging them in, walking them around. Jacob Chansley, the guy with the horns, he was given a special tour. Yes. And he was very peaceful, walking all the way through, saying prayers in certain places.
I've seen
like
the
that.
videos on that.
He got trashed. And secondly, that there was no insurrection. I wasn't charged with insurrection. None of my Patriot friends were charged with insurrection. The president was not charged with insurrection. No one was convicted of insurrection. Didn't happen, but yet we still hear that story. But the biggest lie of all of them is that police died that day. There were 0 police that died that day, okay? There was one cop that did die the following day, but the DC medical examiner already has said, hey, that is natural cause, and his name is Brian Sicknick. So there's a video here that will play that, you know, for safety of time, we'll have this video for download, but basically it's saying here that he was beaten with a fire extinguisher, and it was a total lie. Now, what about the 4 other police that died that they're blaming on us? Well, over the preceding months, 3 other police officers had died of suicide, okay? For whatever reason, we don't know, but it's very high in law enforcement that occurs. Wow. And then the final one was around late April or early May, where a car with an Islamic extremist drove up on the Capitol grounds and ran over a Capitol police officer and killed him. Now, that was 4 months afterwards, and we got the blame for that, and it was the Islamic extremist. So, and that was a lie that they started with on day 1, and they ran with heavy to kind of get that sympathy card to play against us. So that kind of does it for, you know, leading up to January 6th. So then what happened for me? For my arrest day, it occurred 232 days afterwards. It was 6:15 in the morning. 25 FBI agents with guns loaded busted down my door. And if you can take a look at the picture on the right there, you can see the door jam. They literally blew, it was a glass door, so it got shattered. They blew it out of the door frame. I came out with lasers on my chest, on my t-shirt. Oh my gosh. That night, it was pretty crazy. I sleep in t-shirt and underwear. And that night I had on my proud to be a deplorable t-shirt. So I'm out in front in handcuffs during the early morning traffic going by. The crime scene investigation van pulls up. The pop-up tent comes out, everyone puts on their booties, everyone puts on their hats, and they're walking in and out. They're giving the show to the neighborhood because they had to let people know, if you're going to stand up and say something, this is going to happen to you. So it was a very effective program they did to shut down our movement and to get people to just kind of want to move into the background and not be seen. But those are some of the other pieces of contraband that they encountered. So there I am in front, handcuffed, and you know, these agents they're kind of laughing and joking around because it's Memorial or Labor Day weekend, and they're talking about what they're going to be doing for the holiday, and they're all excited. And I just looked up and I said, you guys should be, you know, basically disgusted with yourselves for what you're doing to the American people right now. And then I also heard them talk about something which is about a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. Now, I didn't know much about it at the time, but it kind of stuck in my head at that point. So I got taken down to Santa Ana, I got booked in, and then I was able to make bond. The magistrate here let me out. I had to post a $100,000 bond. I had to get an ankle monitor, agree to curfew, that kind of stuff, and probation, and I was out. But it got revoked 12 days later. Now, during that 12 days, I knew it was going to get revoked for the most part. I found out a little bit more about that suicide bombing, and that was the soldiers that had gotten killed at Abbey Gate. And basically, those 13 soldiers were killed at Abbey Gate because of a stolen election. Because had Joe Biden not been in office, they would be alive, because Donald Trump had an effective way to pull out, and they knew if they'd have messed with it, they'd have been dead themselves. Yeah. So I kind of developed an affiliate, an affinity with those soldiers at Abbey Gate. I knew where I was going. I knew I was going to the DC Gulag. And so in order to provide a little bit of inspiration for me, I had their names tattooed on my arm right here.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I did that is because I knew they're going to take everything away from me, but the one thing they couldn't take away is ink on my skin. So I wanted it there so that if there's ever a time when I'm going through this process and I say, oh, poor me, I can look down here and say, you know what, these kids are dead for the very thing that you're here, which is a stolen election. So that kind of helped me through some dark times too, which is pretty good.
Wow, Jeff, that's amazing. I'm glad it helped you.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And then my bond was revoked. They claimed that there was no conditions of which could be met, but I was already out on bond and there were no conditions that were being a problem, but nonetheless it got revoked. And at that point I started a process where I ultimately ended up going through 13 different facilities. Wow. And each of these facilities had a particular solitary confinement part of it because it was COVID time. So there was 17 in Santa Ana, and then Grady I had 12. When I finally went to DC, there was 17 days there. I was actually moved out of DC. I wasn't told why until I was actually physically taken out of the jail itself. I spent a week in the hole. Turns out another inmate inside the prison was sending envelopes of white powder to all the district judges, and my name was on the return address. Now, fortunately, they knew it wasn't me, but they took me out of there for that reason. Then I ended up going to a couple other jails, and at some point I was able to make bond to prepare for trial because I wasn't able to access my discovery otherwise. That's wild. I was supposed to go to trial in D.C. Actually, I should have been in trial in California, but ultimately ended up being DC because they wanted us there because of the percentage, 92% Democrat vote. Right. All the judges denied all our continuations. I tried to get it to after the midterms. I tried to get it till after the January 6th committee because those were all going on during this time. I tried to get a change of venue. All the motions were denied for all of us. So we had a lot of civil rights that were denied at that point. When it comes to trial, it was about a 12-day trial. Once the jury was selected, I knew that I didn't have a chance. You know, in prison, there's this saying, there's this number, it's 13 and a half. And it's 12 jurors, 1 judge, and half a chance. And I knew I didn't even have my half a chance.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, there were lawyers that allowed to be on the jury pool in DC. They had CNN reporter. One of them was actually in the jury pool was actually one who used to babysit Jamie Raskin's kids.
Oh
my. Do that. Now, when it came to my trial, I had no eyewitnesses and I had no victims to question at my trial, but I was convicted. No eyewitnesses and no victims. Wow. Deliberation was 1 hour. Between me and my co-defendants, we had 28 charges amongst us. It took them 1 hour to deliberate on all of them. And then once we got convicted, it was handcuffs just like you see in the movies. It's very surreal when it happens to you. The jury foreman stands up and is guilty, guilty, guilty. And then you're handcuffed and you walk out of the back. And at that point, that's when the rest of my incarceration continued. I went to Alexandria, to Northern Neck, to DC again, to Oklahoma, Victorville, and finally ended up in Lompoc, where I spent the majority of my time at the Lompoc Federal Corrections up there.
54 days.
Yeah. 54 months was my in solitary confinement. Yeah.
Oh, that's solitary.
That was just solitary confinement. It was a year and a half there.
Whoa, wow.
So ultimately, I was 36 months behind bars, 4 months at home arrest, and 19 days at the halfway house when President Trump pardoned me.
Wow, thank God.
Louis, Representative Gomert and Marjorie Taylor Greene came into the prison, the DC prison. I was there when I saw him. Marjorie Taylor Greene was the one that took that photo. A lot of people have seen that photo right there.
Yes.
They wrote
that's you?
No, that's not me. But
Okay.
but I'm a couple rows back. But
Okay.
she had to take a photo. They didn't want her to have her phone in there, so she had to kind of take it on the sly when she took the photo.
I see.
But they wrote a report about their visit, and the report of that visit was so disgusting that the federal contract was canceled for the DC jail, except they didn't move any of us. They moved all the other federal inmates out of that place while they had to conduct their repairs and everything. This is a picture of me when I left DC after the poison envelope or whatever it was.
God.
They would not provide us razors. They would not let us go to the barber. They would not let us have personal visits. They would not let us have video visits. They wanted us to look like terrorists. And that's what happened to me when I was, from the time that I
Wow,
got,
Jeff, it's
got
unbelievable.
it. Yeah.
It's unbelievable what you've gone through.
So a lot of our due process in the two-tier justice, had taken place. They denied our bonds, motions, and evidence was very difficult, limited evidence. All our hygiene, our mail, our food, our housing was all different, and we were physically assaulted by the guards, emotionally. Even some of the leadership in the DC prison had multiple social media postings about F Trump, F the J6ers, all this kind of stuff, and they still held all their jobs. Unbelievable. And then here we are at this case right here. Where was the outrage for us when they have this guy here, this scumbag here, who is now back here, he's in custody, but look at who they're lauding up to be their poster child.
Yes.
And you know what? I hope they keep it there because everyone's seeing what's really happening here.
Yes.
I don't want them to change anything. I don't want Democrats to change anything they're doing. Here's a guy here who killed these two young kids when he was drunk driving. He ended up serving less time than I did.
It's outrageous.
It's incredible.
It is.
So if January 6th really was what they say it was, why was 14,000 hours classified? Why didn't they just release it all? What are they concerned about? It's a public place. They say, they're worried about methods and means inside the building. It's a public building and all the videos there anyway. Why was the January 6th committee formed against House resolutions, if it was what they say it was? Why was not one incarcerated J6er part of that committee? Why didn't any of us testify?
Right.
Why was Trump intentionally misquoted about the peacefully and patriotically move? And then if January 6th committee and January 6th really was what they said was, why, when Biden went out the door, did he pardon all of the January 6th committee, including their staff?
Yes, with the auto pen.
We now know with the auto pen, exactly.
Yes.
So yeah, there was chaos and everything like that. And we reacted, and it was like I say, a scrum. But basically, at the end of the day, when we were walking off the Capitol grounds, and by the way, when we were walking off the Capitol grounds, all of a sudden, this magnificent public address system worked to tell us about Bowser's curfew, but they didn't use it once during the day, saying, "Hey, folks, the Capitol grounds is restricted this day. We need you to move off the Capitol grounds." They didn't do any of that because they needed us up there, and we haven't even talked about the bomber, right? But they needed us up there. They needed this excuse to clear the Congress because they couldn't have that 24 hours of talking about electoral vote count failures along the way. And so when we left that day, we thought, well, you know what? At least we let them know, hey, we're watching you. We know what you're doing on the inside, but we didn't think it was an insurrection by any stretch of the means.
And this is why we needed your firsthand account.
Yes.
Exactly.
We've seen none of that.
Exactly.
I don't remember hearing anything about the
So
PA
where's
system.
it going to go from this point?
Yeah.
Kash Patel and Bongino said they have something that they're going to be, more information they're going to be releasing. I'm hoping it's going to be the details that they should release, whether they do it or not, I don't know. I had faith still a little bit in Kash Patel and a little less in Pam Bondi to do the right things, and see, we're going to see what's going to happen. But hopefully they'll do what they promised they were going to do. I mean, Kash Patel wrote the book Government Gangsters, and so he knows everything that's going on. So are we really going to see?
Well, I pray they do, Jeff.
Yeah, in fact, here it is. He's talking about how it's going to come up. Another thing that we need to do is we need to return to, obviously, same-day voting, paper ballots, voter ID, just the basic stuffs, right? Well, in California, we know we have a problem because of the Voter Choice Act.
Yes.
And that sounds like such a wonderful thing, except it's absolutely the opposite. Just like the Inflation Reduction Act, right? They give these things these names. I don't remember the exact name, but when they passed the gas bill in California about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, they changed the title of it like about 2 months before the election to confuse everyone. That's what they do. They give these titles. But basically, that's the one that set up these big voting centers. And did you know that every precinct in California does not control their own voting rolls? They're all controlled up in Sacramento. So the voting rolls are a major problem that we have to deal with.
Yes.
It was an opt-in. The Voter Choice Act was opt-in, but it was made codified basically with AB 37. So that's what we're dealing with right now. So we have a supermajority Democrats. So it's going to be an issue to figure out. Or we could just listen to James Carville here, and proof of citizenship is totally unnecessary, and we don't have to worry about that.
Right. Well, folks, thank you so much for being with us. Jeffrey, thank you for coming
Thanks for having
today. We appreciate it. And we'll just look forward to hearing the updates, and we do pray that this, all the chaos in LA will not be what we saw, the summer of love, although that's looks like it's predicted.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.